administration. I lived in DC for quite some time, and I loved going to the Smithsonian Museum, so
Indeed. Can you just come and visit with us again?
I will do so.
Good.
Yeah.
We've been working on a project now for about 2.5, almost 3 years, on urban waterways. The health and state of the waterway, whether a regenerated waterway plays into any city planning ideas or economic development. And as we were doing our research, of course, we realized, wait a minute, people live along these waterways.
That's right.
Who are they? How do they interact with the water that runs through their neighborhoods? And what impact will issues have on them? And we started with the Anacostia River, the other river of DC, and realized how much of an impact environmental injustice and environmental degradation of the river had on communities on either side, on either bank, and particularly east of the river, with poorer, less ethnically diverse neighborhoods. And we wondered if there's a similar story with other urban waterways, and started investigating. When we looked at LA, the first thing that really popped out of us is, where's the river? And the second thing was, who's advocating for it?
Right.
And your name and please forgive my pronunciation, Mujeres de la Tierra, came up, and we wondered, what are women doing in environmentalism, Latina women doing with issues of environmental health and justice, and what is the tie-in? What do communities of interest have to say about the waters and the rivers that run through them? How did you become interested in environmental concerns or concerns about rivers at all?
Well, that's a short question, but a long answer. First of all, thank you so much for I guess, acknowledging the importance of a voice that traditionally isn't sought after.
Let me ask you to introduce yourself and give us today's date
and
where we are.
Today's date's the 3rd. Good morning, my name is Irma Munoz, and I am the founder and executive director of Mujeres de la Tierra, which translated means Women of the Earth, a nonprofit 501c in the state of California. It is a women's environmental organization, and we're at the Los Angeles River Center, where we have our offices, and very happy that we're going to be part of the conversation here. Actually, I used to live and work in DC for the Small Business Administration, and when I left the administration, I wanted to go home and plant a garden and just kick back. That lasted for 2 months because I'm a big activist. So I decided to find a job that would not have this traveling, because I traveled like 80% of the time when I was in administration, and that I could kick back and have more of a balanced life. So I went to go apply for a job at a really pristine, highly respected and valued environmental organization called Tree People, located in Beverly Hills. I went there, and they're located like in the middle of a forest, and when I got there, I said, oh God, I want this job, because it was the extreme of being a business executive to working right in the middle of Mother Earth. So I was there for a year when I started observing quite a number of things. More important that although Tree People did very good work, they didn't know how to do very good work in communities that I cared about, in particular communities of color. And I thought, instead of complaining and being upset, why don't I just start my own organization? Because there are very few organizations that are founded and led by people of color, but in particular women of color. And I think I'm one of the few in the country, as I've been told by a number of folks. And so I started Mujeres de la Tierra, and I love the name because it's women of the earth. It just is so grassroots, and actually many folks who have indigenous roots we grew up not being labeled environmentalists, but caretakers of La Madre Tierra. And caretakers because I remember growing up, my grandparents and my parents determining family events based on the moon, based on the weather, and because they were from farming backgrounds in Mexico, they are very sustainable. I mean, you had to be. When they didn't have plumbing, they put in the original infrastructure to capture rainwater. You know, they did not use chemicals. They used very natural. So everything, for us, the environment is not a job. It is not something we do, you know, that is the in thing. It's something that's very cultural and profoundly spiritual, and it's part of the makeup of who we are. And it starts with our family and our culture and our history. And so I wanted to start an organization that would provide a platform for women, because in our communities and in many communities of color, the women are the ones who kind of direct things and lead things. And so I called it Mujeres de la Tierra with that intention, and realized that I need to establish a platform for women and their children to speak up and speak out about issues that are of concern to them. And what I found out is that you can talk about the environment, but it always relates to their children, or all relates to the health of their neighborhood. It relates to who they are. And, you know, I find nowadays, when someone says they're an environmentalist, it's like, who isn't? We all care about where we live. We all care about nature. We all care. We have to care, because if not, we're going to suffer consequences, which we have already witnessed through a number of tragedies that we've had, you know, from these crazy tornadoes to other things that are taking place. So I'm very proud. It has been tough because when you are, our responsibility, and when I talk to people and I say, what distinguishes my organization from the traditional environmentalists, is I feel, this is going to sound pretty harsh, I feel that we have a moral compass. One, two, that our focus is on the impact to families and neighborhoods, with a balance on how we improve the natural elements, as opposed to, I think, a lot of environmental organizations want to fix that, the natural environment at the expense of people and community. I've seen it, I've witnessed it. Give you an example. Foundry in a poor community, some traditional environmental organizations wanted to shut it down immediately because of nuisance odors. Well, nobody wants nuisance odors. They were concerned about environmental health, they're concerned about community health, but they're more concerned about the environmental health, the nuisance odors. And so they automatically think, shut it down. They're like this. One goal, I say, no, we should not shut it down, because if you do, it's going to impact on families, and you're going to create poverty, job loss. People have to move out of their homes, and that's exactly what happened in a business when it was closed. 1,000 people lost their jobs. People lost their homes. School districts had to close a number of schools because people, when they moved away, they took their children with them. Small businesses suffered. The tax base suffered. Where easily you could have gone in to talk to the ownership and say, look, we have a common goal. You want to keep your place open. You want to retain your jobs. We do too. But let's figure out how we resolve the nuisance odor issue. And in this case, they said, yes, let's do it. But at that point, we found out what they did. This is like an incredible story. What they actually did is that they built parts so that for the exhaust of trucks and cars, so that it would pollute less. The emissions that went out were cleaner. And so, if you recall, a number of years, the automobile industry was collapsing. So Honeywell stopped ordering from them, and so they were put out of business, and now they moved out of state. So 400 workers lost their job. These were good paying jobs that send their kids to college, that make them property owners, you know, they're middle class. And now, because it's a dying art, it's hard for them to get a job elsewhere. So many of them probably at this point have minimum wage jobs. which isn't going to be able to maintain what they have or send their kids to college. So it's all very connected, and where I think we're very practical about what we do. Our organization is also, I distinguishes itself because we don't tell people in their neighborhoods what is good for them. We don't walk in and save the day. I call it the save the day syndrome, where they come and say, oh my God, we're here, we're going to give you this, we're going to do that, we're going to do that. When this is what's going to happen, this is how it's going to happen. No, what we do is that we get invited into neighborhoods because there's an issue, and we teach women how to speak for themselves, to lead for themselves. So what we say is our organization teaches women and their children to own and lead their issues in their neighborhoods, starting at home. And so I think it's a very powerful statement to make. And when you're talking about riverways, most of our folks live next to them, especially the Los Angeles River, because it's a river that has been traditionally been neglected. It's used to be the blighted eyesore of Los Angeles, and rents were cheaper. You even have homeless that have lived in the LA River who made it their home. And so it's really appropriate that we're talking about our role in the development of the LA River, because there is a rich history there, not just with my organization, but other organizations who are like-minded of color, who came together and formed an organization called La Alianza de los Pueblos del Río, the alliance of I guess the pueblos is like little towns, neighborhoods of the river, because we realized that the only people that were giving an opinion were the same group of people. If you met in Canoga Park where the river starts, or if you met here, or if you're meeting, 20 miles away from here, the same cluster of people were going to all the meetings and saying the same thing. And it was Councilman Reyes who said to us, we need an opinion of people who work by the river, live by the river, lay by the river, because we're hearing the same thing from everybody else. And so we said, absolutely, we want to be a part of it, because we believe that the people who live near an area that you're trying to improve should be the ones who speak out about what they want. If you want to talk to me, if you live in the valley about what you want, I'll listen to you. But don't come here and impose your will and your opinion and your thought process where it really shouldn't be, frankly. And so that's why we decided to take a big role, and we've done a lot along the LA River.
Have you discovered and found that doing this sort of work from, to put it crudely, from a community organizing kind of perspective, giving people a chance to speak for themselves, and to gather all their energies together and focus their energies together. Have you found that means of putting information out, getting people to speak about their own issues, especially in concert with other communities along the river, has given everyone at the table a chance to speak and to listen and to come to a new understanding of what's going along, what's happening throughout the LA River Basin?
Well, this organization I told you about, the Alianza, we received as a group a considerable amount of money to go out and to talk to folks who they had done a lot of focus groups, but their voice was not part of that. So we went to Canoga Park, which is the beginning of the LA River. And I've been a community organizer, a neighborhood builder for 30 plus years. Even when I was in the Clinton administration, I did that, the SBA. And I would tell you my toughest challenge of the toughest task I've ever had to do was to do work around the LA River up in Canoga Park. And the reason for it is, and it really surprised me, I develop campaigns for all the projects that we do that make sense. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're, it gets you at your heart, they're inspiring, they're like, make you think. When I went up there, the first thing I do is I personally go and assess the neighborhoods to see what I find. And I go to the businesses, I walk the streets, I go to the parks, I go where people are, you know. They're not at the Chamber of Conference meetings, they're not at the Rotary. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking to actually go where people congregate. You know, even where parents are walking and dropping their kids off at school, laundromats, anywhere I can find them, I go to. I get a good assessment of community life and the vibrancy of it. Well, what I found in Canoga Park is that before I launched a campaign on Give Me Your Opinion about the river, I had to launch a campaign on you have the right to your opinion. Tienes el derecho de opinar. You have the right to get your opinion. And I found that so interesting because most of the people that I spoke there, whether they were day laborers, workers riding their bike to work, Guatemalans living in the river, because I went there and met with them, the first thing they said is, our opinion doesn't matter. All the development that takes place here is at our expense. And nobody's ever asked us anything. They've never asked us if we want a park, if we need a park. They've never asked us if we want this or we want that. It just happens, and we are just kind of very quiet because we don't want to, you know, I guess shake the boat. We don't want to be problems, and so we're tolerated here. And so, what does it matter? Why should we tell anybody what we think because it doesn't matter to them anyways? So that was a very challenging. When people are at a point in their lives where they feel that what they say doesn't matter and nobody cares about what they have to say, so they don't say anything, that in itself is much more challenging than getting people to go to a meeting because they're not going to be there. And so it basically means they're not part of the fabric of that neighborhood and that everything goes on around there and kind of like outsiders just living there and existing there. And so that's what happens. So I try to figure out why don't they feel they have an opinion, and everyone told them the same thing. And one woman who had her baby, she was pushing a little stroller, had just dropped off 2 of her kids at a local school. We were standing right in front of Canoga Park High School, and this is maybe 5-6 years ago. And she says to me, this is all in Spanish, she says to me, she says, okay, right across the street from the high school was this little strip mall, and it had a mom and pop donut shop, it had a mom and pop shoe repair, just, you know, a very small business start. She says, you see that right there, that donut shop? For $1, I can get myself a cup of coffee and 2 donuts. She said, now turn this way, and on that side was a Westfield Mall, and it had they're expanding a Nordstrom's, had top, you know, high-end stores, and there was a Starbucks. You see that coffee shop right there? Tell me what I can buy for $1. What's going to happen is when they develop the LA River, they're going to get rid of that coffee shop because they don't think about where I shop or care that it's going to have an impact on me. And around here, when things change, they're at our expense, at our family's expense. So if they develop the LA River, because many of our apartments, the parking of the apartments face the LA River. So if they're going to approve something, we're going to lose our homes. So people were very scared about that. And so I launched a 45-day campaign, Your Opinion Matters, and I would tell them, this is different. We're coming to you. They asked me to look for folks like you, because you live by the river. You know the river more than most people. And we want the connection of the people who live by the river and get their opinion. I succeeded in convincing them that we care, and I said, look, this is my organization, this is what we do. But you have to be the one speaking, I'm not speaking for you. And so we received a lot of opinions, and most of the opinions that we got is, gosh, we wish this river was as vibrant as the rivers that are in our country. First thing you have to all learn is what a river is. You know, it's plush, it's got trees, it's got flora, fauna, it's got fish, it's got shade, it's a place for families to go and enjoy. You know, that's what you got going on here. So the first thing you have to do is, you guys have to learn what a river is. You know, because it was cemented, you know, it's still cemented up there, it smells real bad. And they said, you know, what I want to, because it would remind them of their hometown, where they came from. So what I found out is when people believe that what you ask them matters, and then you can do something with what their opinion is, they will tell you. especially if they know that you're going to be respectful about what they have to say, which I told them clearly that there was going to be this big report, the LA, the master plan, and that their opinions were going to be integrated in there because it really mattered. That I was sent out because I thought it was very important, as to others, that we get those opinions from them and their children, because they're part of, the vibrancy of creating a river that brings it back to life. And we have to make it for everybody, not just for a certain few. I understood that feeling because I feel that the whole conversation of the LA River, you have a number of folks who feel the river belongs to them because they've been talking about it for so long, and they feel that they're the only ones who should be directing it and leading it and this, that, and the other. You know what? And I find that to be a very privileged way of thinking of things, a very exclusionary. Nobody owns natural resources, for God's sakes. It belongs to all of us. We're responsible for taking and maintaining and taking good care of La Madre Tierra. But when you have that, it means that there's no respect for others. And so I understood why they thought that, because I felt the same way. The big picture, I thought, that's why when the gentleman came, you should see people were like, well, I'm the one who's been here for 20 years, and I'm the one who this. So I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to listen to what they have to say. And what happens, someone is credentials. I have a law degree. I used to work for the President of the United States. I started my own nonprofit. I, find myself to be a very established woman, but find myself, I silenced my voice. Because if you're the only one in the room, you don't think it matters. I don't explain to you. And so I understood it. So when you've lived it and been there, you understand it. So we were able to get, and we were able to get hundreds and hundreds of opinions of what people thought, from children to grandparents to people on bikes to people who, most of them were tenants, and it made could have parked their home for many, many years. And they were all so happy when we talked about them being part of revitalizing the LA River. Because I think that we love nature, and if you're going to do something to improve it, we want to be a part of it because you want to own part of it, because then you feel that I had something to do with this. And so, a long answer, but.
And have you found that that with those opinions that now matter, that certain kind of progress is being made? Have there been success stories that you can point to and build on that show that community involvement really has made a difference?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think first of all, the word community is so big.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about neighborhoods, and the reason we talk about neighborhoods is because if we say, "Oh, I work in the community," I respect the community. Okay, it's too big. Here in LA, you've got so many little neighborhoods all around the river. So our focus is the neighborhoods, and yes, there have been many successes. There's a gentleman by the name of Raul Macias who owns a soccer field and leads it. He's got like 3,000 kids who work for them, who play with him, and he says, "I'm not teaching them how to play soccer. I'm bringing up citizens, responsible young people who are going to be engaged in what happens in their neighborhood." And him, his kids, his coaches, the parents worked very hard and fought for this park that's down the street that was going to be warehouses, and now it's a park. And it's right next to the LA River. And so you have, the big challenge was with the traditional Lairos is they want soccer fields. They don't want active recreation. They say they want, what they're saying is they don't want soccer fields. Very racist way of thinking. What they wanted was passive recreation. And what they found out in this beautiful park is that you can have both. That Latinos and African Americans and Koreans want to be able to play their sports. They also want some quiet time to be able to reflect and to walk next to the LA River and enjoy the quiet and the peace that it brings to everybody. But for some reason, when you see Latinos, they think that if you give them a soccer field, they'll be happy, and that's all they want, and that's not the case. A lot of stereotyping, a lot of racism in the environmental movement. Because you have to talk about the realities of that when you're talking about waterways. but yeah, that was a great success story. And also the success story is that the master plan includes all these folks that traditionally have been excluded, and that because of Councilman Ed Reyes, who wanted to make sure, I remember him telling me, the same people are going to the meetings, as a matter of fact, in Studio City, or here in Canoga Park, or here, right here in Legion Valley. We hear the same thing. He said, I want to hear from people who live and work, because the truth is if you get them involved and engaged, they become part of the river, and the river becomes part of them.
There have certainly been many reports over many years of the concretizing of the river for flood control.
Right.
I understand if there's a problem, engineer a solution. That's not always the best thing to do. And of fences being erected on the river bank to keep people from the deleterious effects
Right.
of the degradation of the river. How have neighborhoods felt about part of their environment really being fenced off, walled off to them? What do the kids say?
Well, the kids go into the water and play when it's very hot because they don't have access to go to the beaches. This is water. Water is water as far as they're concerned. They get on, the tires and they even go in there when it rains. And every rainy season, you have someone being saved. But we, we take ownership. And we know how to climb through fences, and we know how to climb over them, under them, and find areas where we can go in there. Because our thought is, this is a gift from God, and this is one place that does have a place where we can get cooled off. There's no swimming pools in our neighborhood, so why not? If there's water here, why not? And if there's no water, then why can't we just, ride our bikes up and down? So I think that it's very interesting because we opened up that portion, I told you, Memorial Day in the Legion Valley, and the neighborhood came out, and the kids came out, because now it's legal to do what they want to do, and it's being patrolled. I understand that because when it rains, it just gets out of control. It's very dangerous, but I think we have a different relationship to Mother Nature, where, especially children, who live in areas that are urban areas that have high density, very little trees, very, places to play. Now we have parks. Before we didn't have the parks. So I think that kids are very resourceful, and they're very courageous, and they take risks, and they enjoy that. They didn't need a permit, and they did it. Now they can do it, But I do think that traditionally we have been excluded from many resources. Look at Malibu. Look at the beaches in Malibu. Everybody's being excluded except for the homeowners, and so resources that I think that what I liked about the opening of that recreational zone is that you had grandparents, you had their children, their grandchildren, and it was a big celebration that, oh my God, it's like we got our own little private Disneyland. It's really interesting though, when I talked to some of the parents and the young people, they were giggling from excitement that now they don't have to worry about getting ticketed or, do something illegal, because now it was okay. But I do think there's a connection to the strengthening of family life and strengthening of neighborhoods and overall community life when you have natural resources available to all who live near and around there.
Have you seen any research, or, I know we have anecdotal evidence, but have you seen any research that has shown that having real access to natural resources and all the benefits and all the different ways in which one can engage in one's own neighborhood has led to a change in health of the residents
Well, I think
and
that's
the attitude towards civic engagement.
well, I only can tell you what people have told me. I've seen studies with Robert Garcia in the City Project. If you have not talked to him, he's he's a very good person to talk to. He's done a lot of work and research on the connection between a child being actively involved, and not only their health, but their mental health and their ability to do better academically. He has maps that shows you where there's green space, open space, and when there's not. And in many of our communities, there's not. And if there is some parks, the parks have not been well maintained. I guess the way I rationalize this, because it's pretty tragic, I rationalized it the following way. If they never thought that we should have been part of the conversation along Valley River, why would there be any studies? We got to do our own studies. And so it's all very connected, And I think Barbara Garcia is one of the best resources for that. I also think that Raul Macios of Anahuac was seeing, children and their families. Playing soccer is a family event. The whole family goes. You don't just send your kid off and, they go, they bring food. It's a family day. They get there early, to the game's over. They hang out in the park, and it strengthens family life and appreciation for the natural environment. And I think there does need to be studies, because I think there probably is. Through our own experience, we helped develop a park in El Monte, in a very poor neighborhood, majority Latino immigrant community. It's called Mariposa Gibson Park, and it took 10 years from the minute one thought about it to it opening up. And you could just see, on opening day, there were literally hundreds of families, hundreds of kids, just in having a space, a place for them to play and be. That it was not an empty lot, and it wasn't, a torn down house. It wasn't, a decrepit place that you had to avoid broken glass and whatnot. That was a place for them. And I remember when I was knocking on doors to talk to people about, how about a park right there in that empty spot? And he says, all the men were working in the garden early Saturday morning, and they said, oh gosh, he says, you're the 5th person who's come and talk to me about wanting to build us a park. I said, oh no, I'm not telling you I'm going to build a park. I'm saying, do you want a park? And if you want a park, I can help you acquire a park. This is about me. I said, I will come to the park maybe twice. Opening day, and when they put the shovel in the ground, But I don't live here. I'm not going to come to the park. Maybe I'll pass by on a number of occasions, but why would I work for something that I'm not going to enjoy? And he says, this is the first time anybody's told us that, if we want it, we have to do it. I said, yeah, and I'll help you do it. But if you don't want a park, then we're not going to build a park. And see, and I think I think it has a lot to do with self-esteem. I think it has a lot to do with people's self-worth and the power to have the ability to control what happens in their lives, especially what happens near and around you. Because if you feel that you have the power to decide whether you want a skate park for your kids, a library for your kids, or a park for your kids, or whatever the case, or a supermarket. I mean, for God's sakes, we have to. Even that's become an argument where communities have to be asking for, fresh fruits and vegetables in supermarkets, and fight against the food swamps where there's so much fast foods. There's nothing more powerful and more majestic to witness when you could see a parent acknowledging that, oh my God, I have the power to change, to advocate, to decide, to determine. And I think what happens with many parents is that the bureaucracy is so much like this, they just think it's hopeless, and they feel helpless, so I can't do anything about it. But what we are, mujeres, is we're confidence holders. And what you give a community is you give them a little win, and for them it's a big win, because they never they've never been able to do anything because they find it all so overwhelming, you know, and so we teach people to fish, you know, we teach people to fish, and I think when people see that, people will do it if they feel that the lives of the children are going to be better. It's the key is the children, you know, because they want their children to have a better life, and if they feel they can speak up. In today's paper, Los Angeles Times, there's an article about elderly Koreans who were really shy and timid and did not want to get involved, and now they get mad if they're not involved, if they don't participate. So I think that if people feel that they do have the right to an opinion, that they have the power to make good change take place, or to stop bad things from happening in the neighborhood, they will engage. And I've seen it over and over and over and over again. And I just feel that in the last couple of years, the way the country's been, is that there's a lot of loss of hope because people in the economy. And so I find more and more people volunteering, more and more people wanting to get involved. We do these volunteer events, and one of the cores of the African American community is the Kennethon Park. There's where I live over Kennethon Park. And there's nothing more beautiful when you have families with their children. The children are fighting for the shovel because they're the ones who want to plant that tree. And these kids are 2, 3, 4 years old, you know. And the parents want their children to really know that they have a right to participate in beautifying, restoring their neighborhood and improving where they live. So it's a very powerful, you know, it's very powerful, but you need the right kinds of folks. You don't need the organizations that go in to use people to accomplish their goals because they're being paid a big amount for having ABC. The whole purpose of community involvement, community engagement is strengthening community life by providing them the confidence that they can do it. We train and inspire folks to take ownership of their issues if they choose to, and then they decide what those issues are. I will never go into community and say, you know what, there's an empty lot, let's make a park, or let's do this, or let's do that. That is not what you do. You ask people, what's on your mind? And what happens is you go in there with one thing, and you ask people what they want. You hear, the police don't come when we call them. You know, the school doesn't respond to us when this, or whatever the case may be. And so, but when someone has a little victory, they think, oh my God, if I can do this, that means I can do that. And I'm giving an example of that. These women who built that little park I'm telling you about, when they were building it, and so they said, they called me up one morning, and they said, we need to talk to you. And I live 30 miles away from them. You need to come tomorrow. They summons me. And I'm like, okay, I'll go. If it's important to them, it's important to me. So they said, we have something to show you. And they showed me pictures of children climbing over the Union Pacific train and crawling under it because it idled so much that when they were going to school, you know, they couldn't get to school unless they climbed or jumped over it. So I showed them pictures of kids doing it, and they showed me pictures of parents doing it with strollers. I'm like, what is going on here? And they said, for years and years and years, they tried to work with the school district and the city, and they had no power. So I said, I just happened to have known the new person that was hired with Union Pacific. And I told them, this is your meeting, I'm going to have a meeting with you. You tell them what you saw, show them the pictures. We held the meeting, we invited the school district people, we invited the city, we invited the parents. And the Union Pacific was horrified, like, oh my God, you know, and, you know, we're trying to prevent someone from dying, being killed, so on and so forth. So they resolved that issue. The Union Pacific says, so we're not going to idle anymore 2 hours before school starts and 2 hours after school lets up because we don't have a situation. So in the class, and I was so proud and happy because I don't speak. They, you know, I prepare them, they speak. You know, once again, I don't live there. So one lady gets up and she says, when they're done with it, she says, well, now that we've resolved that, I want to know, what is it you carry in these trains? Do you carry poisons or toxics that can have a negative impact? And if there's a derailment, how come we never know what the emergency plan is? So the Union Pacific people staring at me saying, wait a second, you told us at the meeting. And the beauty of that is that once you give a woman or a person a platform that they're going to listen to you and you can resolve issues, then there's no way, you can't stop. When she said that, I was so proud. I thought it was such a defining moment that when you give folks that platform, the opportunity to have their voice be heard, that they will continue other issues that they've been holding on to forever. And so I thought that was everybody was mad except for me. I just thought, oh my God, I'm so proud. I felt like a proud mama of, 10 women who are like 10, 20 years younger than me. But that's what happens.
I know we've read a lot about the browning of the green movement, and in speaking with you just now, I'm beginning to think that maybe that the definition of that isn't that now we have different ethnic groups, different communities of interest speaking and becoming aware of and working on environmental issues, but that we're actually changing the tenor of the conversation and changing the speakers who are at the table, who are advocating for change and regeneration and revitalization. What is your take on the browning of the green movement?
Well, I've really thought a lot about this, and I'm going to tell you a story of when I was 7 years old, because I still think about it. We were living, we were renting a house, and I'll never forget, we were in West Los Angeles, and my mother was running in and out of the house, and she was pulling every pot and pan, every container she could possibly, so it would be outside for the rains. So I remember sitting there and just started to cry. She says, "What's wrong, Mija?" I said, "Are we so poor that you have to go out and pull out every trash can, every pot and pan to capture the rainwater?" And she started laughing. She hugged me. She says, "Don't you know that rainwater is the best water to water plants, and you could do all sorts of great things for it? And why let it go to down the street if you can capture it?" And I tell people this story because our parents and our ancestors are very resourceful people, and they wouldn't say I'm an environmentalist, but they would say it's important to take care of resources given to us by God. It's it's maybe the same outcome but a different way of looking at it. And I remember that day so clearly because in farms, many of us come from farming backgrounds. They came to capture the rainwater there. And I was working for Tree People. It was a big deal that they had doing cisterns. And it was a big deal that they were capturing rainwater. To the point, like a couple of years ago, they now have these things called rain barrels that you can buy for $200-$300. And I tell them, when I go talk to them, I say, "I want to tell you a story about my mother, who, when you really think about what she was doing, it was common sense, what she learned from her parents and her grandparents. And here you guys are now selling $200 barrels, I'm calling them rain barrels as it is." I said, "Mine got it when I was 7 years old, and probably much sooner." I said, so I laugh at the way you guys evolve things and the way I grew up with things. And so that story comes into mind when you ask me about the browning and the green movement. The truth is that we have always taken care of Mother Tierra. The truth is that we value Mother Nature. The truth is, if you come into our neighborhoods, most of us have gardens. We sweep more than hose down, and we do a lot of things when you think about all that. We are the most resourceful people. I don't know. My mom takes a plastic bag and uses it for a million ways before it finally lost its life and luster and finally gets to the trash can. I guess I do want to share one thing with you that does cause some controversy, but when you think about it, I think there may be some truth to what I say. I want to comment on the whole environmental justice. I think the environmental justice movement was started in the church. Why? Because I was married in that denomination, so I know this very well. And it was a great service. The problem now, or the challenge that I see now, is that, especially in Los Angeles, in the state of California, you are not talking to the mainstream in the city and county of Los Angeles. Next month, you're going to be talking to the mainstream in the state of California. We, together with our brothers and sisters in the Korean and African community, are now the majority, although many of us still thinking of minority. And the EJ movement has done great work, continues to do great work, but I think that the traditional environmental organization has made the EJ movement the affirmative action of the environmental movement, because we do not get our fair share of resources. We are always the PS for most legislation. The very end it says, oh, and by the way, environmental justice communities, blah, 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 blah. We want to make sure they get their, their pennies thrown at them. No, it should be the other way around, for God's sakes. And the truth is that that's what bothers me about that. And we are now more vocal than we've ever been. We're finding our own voice, because we realize that, and what this is really all about, I'm a part of a weekly call of Latinos from Washington, D.C., from EPA to the White House, and others who are involved with the environment. And about a month ago, the big thing is they were commenting on an article that appeared in the Washington Post that talked about how now a lot of big traditional environmental organizations were hiring Latinos and putting them on our board, and they were like, oh my God, we've come our days now here. And I said, you know what, let me tell you what this is about. This is not about the realization that we are smart people and we can contribute and blah, blah, blah. What this is about is resources. Who gets the money and where do you spend it? That's what this is about. And who controls how money is spent. It isn't all of a sudden the acknowledgement that, oh my God, we have overlooked the Black community, or we've overlooked the Latino community, or we've overlooked this community. It's acknowledgement that if we are going to get more monies from foundations and others, we have to make a priority, or appear to be that we really care. And the first thing we do is that we bring in a couple of folks of color, so it looks like we know what we're talking about, maybe 1 or 2 board members. They don't consider the following. They don't consider the contractors that they hire. Is it a fair reflection? Where our money is, the majority of our money is spent. I happen to be on the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Board, where historically the only water people cared about are water in the coastal communities. And so now that I'm there, I start asking questions about inland communities, and communities that traditionally have not been, nobody's ever advocated for, and ask questions about. And so that's the beauty of having a diverse, you don't need to be Black or Latino to ask those kinds of questions, but you do need to have the consciousness and the priority that those communities, if you know anything about watershed management, the watershed does not begin and end at the ocean. The watershed starts inland communities, up in the mountains, and everything that happens in between. So you have got to start using the intelligence, knowledge that you have to develop your programming and develop it so it makes sense to people, So this greening, or this browning of the green movement, it's always been there. It's just that now it's being recognized. I think that families have recycled, As long as I can remember, my mom and my dad recycled. They knew that it was wasteful to, throw plastic away, Also brought in some income into the household, So I think that's what there needs to be a study of. I highly regard my traditional environmental friends and organizations, so I don't need to think that because they do great work. They just don't do great work in communities that I care about, And sorry, but that's how I feel. And there's a different way of doing it. They go in there to get the project done, so going in there to strengthening the community and improving community life and teaching people to fish. Because the truth is the study that should happen is those groups that build parks. Because if you give a community something that they were not a part of, they will use it, but they're not going to respect it or take care of it. And what is it you're really trying to do here? You're trying to create this to be part of the fiber of their household and their family, or you're trying to give people things just because you got a contract. So I think it's a very interesting this whole conversation of the browning of